Have you ever really stopped to think about what your body says about God? It's a pretty deep question, right? Well, it's the absolute core of the book, A Question of Image. So today, we're going to unpack its ideas about the theology of the human body, and trust me, it's a topic that's way more physical and personal than you might think.
Made in God's image. It's a phrase you've probably heard a million times. But what does it actually mean when you're just, looking in the mirror? That's the huge question the book tackles. And as we're about to see, the author makes the case that the answer is a whole lot more physical than many of us were ever taught to believe. And it all comes back to this one line from the book of Genesis. Seriously, everything. This is the launchpad for the book's entire argument, that our very own flesh and bones are an absolutely crucial part of what it means to reflect the divine.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, with the original blueprint. The foundational idea in the book is that our body isn't just some temporary shell or a vehicle for our soul. Nope, it's a sacred, intentional creation from the get-go.
So the main argument the author puts forward is that our likeness to God isn't just floating around in our mind or our spirit. It's fundamentally embodied. It is literally in the flesh. And this idea, it directly pushes back against a lot of traditional, maybe more spiritualized ways of thinking.
And this slide right here really shows you the split. Over on the left, you've got the worldview that came from a lot of Greek philosophy. This idea that the body and soul are two totally separate things. But on the right is the biblical worldview the book is focused on, a unified whole. In Hebrew thought, this is the concept of nephesh, a living being. There's no split. You don't have a body, you are a body. It's a total package deal.
And according to the book, the ultimate proof of this whole idea is the incarnation. The belief that God actually became a physical human being in Jesus is what some theologians have called the scandal of the incarnation. I mean, think about it. The logic is pretty straightforward. If flesh was good enough for God, then it has to be profoundly, deeply sacred. Okay, so if the body is sacred, what does that mean for how we treat it? This next part explores what happens when that image is attacked, and we're going to dive into the ethical side of some of life's most difficult and complex issues. The book really grounds the whole idea of the sanctity of life in this incredibly powerful verse. The thinking here is very direct. Because human beings are made in God's image, harming a human life is an act that is just uniquely serious.
And this right here is the core principle the author uses to look at all sorts of ethical debates. The logic is that you just can't separate the person from their body, and you can't separate that body from the divine image it carries. So because of that, what happens to the body matters a lot.
So the author uses this framework to navigate the incredibly complex issue of abortion. And as you can see here, the book doesn't pretend to have easy, simple answers. Instead, it really lays out all the different facets of the debate. It acknowledges a woman's bodily autonomy, it weighs the theological belief that life begins at conception, and it really faces the heartbreaking complexities of situations like rape or serious medical risk. And this same theological framework gets applied to end-of-life decisions too. The book draws a really critical distinction, as you can see, between what it calls active termination, that's directly ending a life, and passive omission, which it describes more as allowing nature to take its course by stopping treatments that are only really prolonging the process of dying. All right, let's pivot and bring this into the world we live in right now. How does this idea of a sacred body really hold up against all the pressures we face today? In this section, we're going to see how the book argues that this divine image is constantly being challenged and, honestly, distorted. The book offers up a really stark example of this pressure, with a statistic on self-harm. In the UK, it's estimated to be as high as 400 for every 100,000 people, and the highest rates are found among young people. This is a direct, physical assault on the body, and it's driven by these huge internal and external pressures. And get this, the research mentioned in the book uncovers something I bet you weren't expecting. While we often think of body image as being a bigger issue for women, one study actually found that a higher percentage of men, almost 81%, reported having anxiety about their appearance, compared to 75% of women. That's a pretty clear sign that this pressure is absolutely everywhere, and it affects everyone. So what in the world is driving all this pressure? Well, the book points a big finger at mass media. This quote here explains it perfectly. The media doesn't just show us beauty, it normalizes a really narrow, often completely unattainable ideal. And in doing that, it makes any deviation from that ideal seem like a problem that needs to be fixed. And the results of all these pressures? Well, they're all around us, as this slide shows pretty clearly.
The book goes into a whole range of issues, from the constant push for cosmetic surgery to that feeling of dissatisfaction we get when we look in the mirror. It points to all the digitally manipulated images we see every single day, and even to broader, devastating issues of bodily harm, framing all of them as distortions of that original, sacred image.
So, after hearing about all of that pressure and distortion, is there a way back? Is there any good news here? Well, this final section explores the book's proposed solution, a path that leads us toward reclaiming and restoring a sacred view of our own bodies.
So the fundamental shift, according to the book, isn't really about changing your body, it's about changing how you see it. It's about moving away from seeing your body as a project to be perfected under a cultural lens to seeing it as a gift to be honored through a lens of faith. That's a huge change in perspective.
The book lays out a pretty clear three-step path to get to what it calls a shalom image, which basically means a body that is a piece. Step 1. Acknowledge that your body is a sacred gift that you're holding in trust. Step 2. Look to the model of a perfectly restored image. And finally, step 3. Just embrace that this is a lifelong journey, a gradual process of restoring that original glory. It's not a quick fix, it's a transformation.
And that leaves us with this final question to chew on. If we really truly saw every single body, our own and everybody else's, as a reflection of a divine image, how would that change everything? How we live, how we judge, how we care for ourselves, and how we care for one another. It's a lot to think about.